Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, joined here by my good colleague and pal, Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, how you doing, my friend?
You know.
Still not over it a day later. Still not over it.
I'm annoyed. But I told you I'm going to do this right away because I don't want to forget and I don't want to leave it till the last second.
Yes.
We've talked about the captain. This is Captain Scott Wyman, who I gave my Ravens tickets to when they came, and he sent me this little note. It says, Brian, thank you again for the tickets to the Steelers and the Ravens game. My wife, Molly, and I had a great time. As a munitions officer in the Air Force, I thought the coaster coin would be a great thank you. It has imaging of the shell and flame through its many uses, as well as the history. Thank you again, Captain Scott Wyman and Mrs. Molly Wyman. And he sent me this, which is this coaster with cool. The ammo thing and all the history about it on it. It's very cool. Oh, wow. And since we know how many of these I go through every show, it's actually incredibly useful. And thank you, Scott, and Mrs. Scott. Appreciate it. Glad you guys had a great time.
Yeah, long time listener. I don't have anything nearly as cool as that, Brian, but while you're enjoying a beverage, I just showed this to you off air just in case. Once again, it's printed so it faces me while I drink it, but so that people don't think I have a blank coffee mug here. It says, I like the Steelers and coffee. And I know you're not the host who likes toast or
coffee.
Yeah, coffee.
That stuff's nasty. Hot liquids, bad.
I like flavored coffee. I've got this, you know what, Meyer, if you got the Meyer stores around you, the Michigan Cherry. I know it's that place up north. We don't like to say the M word. But the Michigan Cherry coffee, they're the only ones I think that make it. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but man, it's fantastic. I like it. I'm not all 100% flavored coffee. There's some that I can, take or leave or just leave. Hazelnut is not in the rotation, for example. But, breakfast blend, medium roast, some dark roast. I kind of do it all, about 90% of the way there. But yeah. I like the Steelers despite that. Of course, got my girlfriend's name on there too. Art Heather. So yes, and I told her because she saw when I was FaceTiming with her earlier, and then she's like, "Uh-oh," and I was like, "Yeah, they all make them that way." So they handle. So if you're right-handed, you're never going to see what's printed on it. It don't matter if it's an official Steelers mug with the pewter thing on it or whatever. It's just the way it is. So
it's so you can remind yourself that you like the Steelers and you like coffee. That's what it is.
I almost spit my coffee out at you because, yes, I still like the Steelers. I'm still defensive of the Steelers. Have they lost 4 straight, my friend? Yes, they have. I tell you what, if the game wouldn't have progressed at the end the way that it did, I'd probably be a little more downtrodden than what I am. And I know we discussed it, and I have like a bunch of actually handwritten notes for a change.
Amazing.
And I actually just have names because today is Black Monday around the NFL. There's lots of teams, not the Steelers, not what Mike Tomlin, like he said, not a black trash bag day for them. They're down to business. This is a new season. Once you're in the door, that's all that matters. And I'm trying to think who else was just saying that. There was a coach like Jimmy Johnson or somebody on one of these pre or post game things as I was watching the games on Sunday. But there's all the things that people bitch and complain about with the Steelers. And we're going to be kind of focused on looking at the season, not really looking ahead so much to the Ravens yet. We'll be back later in the week with that. But this 19-17 game, there's a lot of negatives, obviously, and it's easy to just breed negativity. But when the fan base runs their goddamn mouths all the time, taking the Lord's name in vain, is shame on me, right? But I just have to be said because it's like, it's always something. It's Tomlin, fire Arthur Smith. Smith's getting a head coaching sniff or interview with the Jets or whatever, and people are like, take him. And it's like, you tend to forget some of the people that have been through this door, like Randy Fichtner or Matt Canada. And when somebody has one iota of success, and they're out the door too, usually as a coordinator, if they have the, aspirations of being an NFL head coach. Some do, some don't. You see what happened with Brian Callahan and the Tennessee Titans this year, right? He goes from the Cincinnati Bengals, and that offense continued just humming along without him. But he goes down there. He takes his dad with them to do the offensive line. They got the top pick in the draft, and they already picked a quarterback the year before with Will Levis, and they got Mason Rudolph.
Oh, hey.
My old dude down there. Yeah, like seriously. So what are they going to do? They got the top pick. Just canning Mike Vrabel, who's going to be one of the top probably coaching candidates. You see what the Patriots did with a black trash bag. They got rid of Gerard Mayo immediately. And Robert Kraft's apologizing. You know, they were looking to maintain the same thing from Belichick without Belichick. That didn't work out. So I'm not here as the Steelers. I know, 4-game losing streak. They got 10 wins. They're in the playoffs. They're not necessarily riding a wave of momentum. The situation could be a lot different, and they could be completely out. And people are asking, well, if they lose this or this happens, are they gone? And the reason I'm like rambling about this, some of this is I have names on my list, particularly that came to mind yesterday and watching some of this and just seeing all the comments on social media. On rapid fire, when you talk about fan bases and they're getting like all up in their feels, Aaron Rodgers. Every single person who wanted Aaron Rodgers a year or two ago. And look what that did. No, he finally threw 4 TD passes in a game where, talk about another dumpster fire team. A gotta have it game for the Miami Dolphins. You got Tua Tagovailoa, a guy who just cashed a major contract, $50 million a year, saying, well, if we make the playoffs, there's no way I'm missing a playoff game. And it's like, in order to get there, this is a playoff game. You got to beat the Jets. What? Could you imagine that? And then you've got, remember when Eric Bieniemy was the hot hire and he was going to go off on his own from the land of Kansas City to either be a head coach or a coordinator no, gone. That guy is gone twice over. Washington got rid of him. He couldn't fix anything there. You look what their team's like now with the coaching change. He went over to UCLA, gone from there. Byron Leftwich. I'm going to have to look up Byron Leftwich because to be completely honest, I don't know where he's at. But everybody was like, oh, hey, look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Blah, blah, blah. They're doing all this. I have 2 on here. And then when you talk about guys like George Pickens and Divas and hello, Tyreek Hill, he's running his mouth down. He posted a picture, the Antonio Brown thing. It's Antonio Brown's body and everything. He wants out of Miami. And I've already got the fan base here in Pittsburgh. Like, hey, would you give Tyreek Hill a look? And it's like, you guys couldn't handle Juju playing Fortnite and riding a bicycle. How are you going to handle Tyreek Hill? Like the amount of stuff that people, it's like, if it's a win, and we could talk about how this game could have been a win, it probably solves a whole lot of it. But it's like, man, do you people really live and die so much on, like, you know, a loss or a close loss or these multiple losses? It's just, wow, it's a game. And thank goodness you've got people like Omar Khan, the stability of the Steelers overall as a franchise, whether it be Mike Tomlin, the Rooneys and the ownership and everything else running this ship, or else things could be far, far worse.
Well, I won't disagree with that. Things absolutely could be far, far worse. Look, and I say this being as guilty as everyone else, it's a spoiled fan base. We've talked about it a million times, right? We're used to winning. If we don't win, then something's wrong and we have to do something about it. The problem is everybody is so reactionary anymore, just in the world in general. It's like, Pickens had a bad game, right? Pickens had a really bad game.
Yeah.
Let's just not.
He was
let's
MIA.
Not play.
No, there's no sugarcoating that.
There's no sugarcoating it. But every time he comes in and he makes a catch that's absolutely ridiculous, everybody's like, George Pickens. So what happens yesterday? I'm watching the post-game press conference, on Saturday night. And of course, it's like, get rid of Pickens. Get rid of Pickens. He's the worst. Just because you can't. People are so flip-floppy and reactionary after one event, right? Look, and I was extremely negative about this game, right? I was extremely annoyed with this game. I continue to be extremely annoyed with this game. But I'm not going to say fire Tomlin because I don't believe that's the right move. I'm not going to say get rid of George Pickens because I don't believe that's the right move. I'm not convinced because I wasn't convinced before that Russ is the right guy going forward. I don't know that Justin is. I don't know that next year is not going to be a giant cluster F over everything. I don't know what next year is going to look like. But it's not the end of the world, and we don't have to scrap everything and start over again. God forbid we did, because we got a lot of very expensive folks on our defense, which is the only positive I will take out of that Bengals game, is other than the first drive where they looked like a sieve, The defense played a reasonably good game against one of the top offenses in the NFL. As I told you, losing T. Higgins helped, but they were still playing a solid game, and that's without Jackson, right? So, you're still missing a key component in the back end. I don't want to excuse them, though, right? You can get, as we've talked about before, you can look at the first 3 games of this slide and kind of write it off and say to yourselves, well, that's maybe the 3 best teams in the NFL, or at least the 3 of the 4 best teams in the NFL, something along that lines. I don't know. Maybe I'm not going to put the Ravens in that top 4. I'll put them in the top 10, though. But these are some of the top teams you're playing against, and you didn't look good, right? You look terrible. The Bengals, here's the problem. This is the problem that I still have, and I will continue to have. The Bengals defense is ass, right? They are horrible. The choices that got made on the offensive side of the ball to attack this team was like, hey, it's cold, we're scared. What happened? The way they beat the crud out of the Bengals, the way they took advantage of the Bengals is they threw the ball. Now, all of a sudden, the offensive line couldn't block Hendrickson, and Russ has no time. It is, I don't know. To me, the offense hit a peak and has been going in the opposite direction over the last 3 or 4 games. And the offensive line has consistently seemed to me to be on a downward trend, especially as it comes to pass protection. I feel like I say it every week. So there's a lot of things that need to get fixed and a lot of things that are problematic. But they're in the tournament, so to say, as they say. We're in, and we do know how to beat the Ravens. So, I'm not saying we're going to, we'll talk about it later in the week, but, you can't even have a chance if you're not in, and at least they're in.
Yeah, it starts there. I know people are going to say, oh, well, the no losing seasons, and there's people saying one and done. Just don't even watch the freaking games then. Just, you know what? Just go become a Kansas City fan, because apparently they just win all the time. I don't have the greatest feeling that Kansas City's going to make it all the way. I know they're in position to, but man, you have to think at some point the odds of winning these 1-score games is going to run out. But some of the nonsense I see around social media and on the internet and people talking the next day, and this is antiquated. You can't win games by just hoping to hold your opponents to 20 points or less or whatever. And I looked at the Kansas City Chiefs schedule. I looked at their whole 5 games they allowed. Let's see here. I think it was 22 or more points. Only 5 games. 2 of them were losses. Of course, that includes one of those losses was Sunday, where they sat everybody down on the bench, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, they only gave up, to more than 20. I'll say 20. It's not even 22, because they gave up 24 to Tampa. That was an overtime victory. They gave up 25 to the Bengals, 27 to the Carolina Panthers somehow, and then 30 to the Bills, and 38, of course, the season high, the 38, nothing blanking. I mean, that's got to feel good being the Broncos, even though you're beating up on backups. But as far as momentum,
got to make Carson Wentz feel really, really bad about himself again.
Like, yeah, you get to play at home, you get to ride some momentum, you get a must-win game to make the playoffs. I mean, that had to feel good for all of them. You got a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix, who's, even if it is a system, it looks like he's learned it and he's done well, especially since the Steelers had to see them last. Their defense, they've been doing, I've been impressed with the Broncos. They're finally back in the playoffs for the first time since Peyton Manning was on this roster. But to swing back to the Chiefs, they've given up 7, 10, 10, 13, 14, 17, 17, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20. Those are the game. That's how many points they've given up in a game. And then they've actually scored. We get the maths with Joe graphics somewhere here. They had about the same exact streak here. It was 22 or fewer points in 8 of their games this season. Same record, where they've only lost 2 of the games, so they were 6-2. So they're
Did
doing.
They ever manage to score over 30?
They scored exactly 30, and that was in overtime with the Buccaneers, and then against the Carolina Panthers, the worst team in the league. They scored 29 against the Steelers, unfortunately. So,
all right, here's what I'm going to say then.
Yeah.
The question was, did they score over 30? 30 actually equals 30. There's the maths with Brian. 30 is the same as 30. So they did not score over 30 points. Right. They did not score over 30 points.
Yeah. And that the whole point is that they've been playing a lot of defense. We were talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, the fan narrative that's out there and the people that want to talk about, Andy Reid and this, that, and the other thing, it's like, throw it out the window. They've been trying to get it done. They've had their own issues on offense. They brought a guy, Humphreys, off of like the street to play on the offensive line. I mean, the Steelers tried to do the same thing. You got Mike Williams, and you got one pass that goes his way, and that comes back around. Again, I have some notes here. That comes back around to, you've got a bunch of things that we said. So offensively, they were offensive. Again, the Steelers went the whole year without scoring a touchdown in their opening drive. That's horrendous. And that's the only series they had in the first quarter on offense.
Yep.
The bigger thing, Brian, is when you're talking about the defense and only giving up the one touchdown to the Bengals, who've been they've been stockpiling points the entire season, right? Let me see how many games the Bengals have where they've scored. Let me see. So over 30. We'll get the there you go. How many games over 30 points? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 games. And they have one right on the money with 30 as well.
Not quite half. But it's close.
It's close. And the Steelers only hold the one touchdown. Of course, that was Corey Trice being targeted 3 times in a row against Jamar Chase, a guy who led the league in receiving in catches and yards and touchdowns, a triple crown guy. And then still T. Higgins still played like 60% of the game. I had his official numbers here, 68%. So he got dinged a little later, of course.
Yep.
And so you're right in that, but man, you're talking about wide receiver, like, it's not even wide receiver 1A and B. It's like wide receiver, like star, or whatever, and then wide receiver star. Like, these guys are the top, both wide receiver 1
They're going to have a
guys.
fun offseason.
Well, we'll get into that, of course, when we get, hopefully we won't be talking off season for a few more weeks here. There is maybe some optimism. Try to bring some optimism. Mike Pursuta and Charlie Batch had a lot of the same thoughts on the post game. I was like, thank God it's a little more refreshing. I mean, rest in peace. I loved Stan Savran, but sometimes he could dwell a little bit on some of the negative tones of the game. And Pursuta actually felt that the Ravens is a favorable matchup because, it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. This is going to be brutal for either of these teams. They don't want to see each other on either side, right? You come out of like these divisional games, and then you're basically going to go into one in the playoffs, and we know what it's like when you play after that, at least for like the Steelers. And I mean, the Ravens are in that same boat too. They've been playing a Saturday schedule, so this doesn't really screw them up too much, playing the Saturday night game, 8 o'clock, Amazon Prime. Everyone's going to be bitching about that too. You're going to have Amazon Prime to watch it unless you're in the local areas.
It's a big green map, right? Everybody has it, but only on Amazon Prime.
Only if you have Amazon. So, okay. So getting back to, all right, the defense, right? Locking them down for the most part. I mean, could it have been a little bit cleaner? I mean, the Bengals had the ball for 38 minutes, but that's because the Steelers' offense did not play complimentary enough.
At all.
We will get to that. Because of course the Steelers punt and then touchdown, 13 plays, 63 yards, but 3 plays -6, 3 plays 7, 6 for 20, turnover on downs, 1, the -9 or whatever, and they end the half. And then you start at halftime, you get the ball, you defer, and then you punt twice on your 2 possessions in the third quarter, 3 for 2 yards and 5 for 14. You're damn lucky that the defense was fresh enough, or whatever the rotations. They did some different things. You got beat, I still, we'll do defense. We'll do defense because your dude Cam Hayward had one hell of a game, if not his best game of the season.
Cam's a grown-ass man. I mean, he continues to be the ageless wonder, as I don't even remember what Patrick Queen or whoever told us what he's like 70. He's older than me. And but I mean, he had a fantastic game. He's had a fantastic year.
Yes.
Right. It was nice to see that. It's nice to see Keanu Benton get in there and get a sack. At the same time, you have the flips of that, right? TJ finally makes a move, right? TJ's been invisible for 3 games. TJ finally makes a move, gets in there, gets the sack, and bleep, 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 we get a holding call, which was a legitimate call. There are times when they just can't get out of their own way. They could have even been better than they were, and they were pretty good, but they just keep stepping on their own toes.
Yeah, that's something you can't have, is defeating yourself. That penalty, it was hard to see whether or not what happened. I remember I texted you that officiating crew, I already was holding my breath with seeing John Hussey was assigned, and it was everything I expected from that, because they just didn't have, it was just sloppy. It's just messy. Even if
first down, no, overturned. First down, no, overturned. First down, no, overturned. How could you do it 3 times in a row?
I've never seen anything like that, especially when we're talking, I'm watching other games. Oh, there should have been a safety in the Lions-Vikings game, or should have been a safety by virtue of intentional grounding. And I just watch it. So it's not just a Steelers thing. I watched that very similarly. I saw something else where they couldn't determine the nose of the ball or whatever, because I think the Lions were wearing like their alternate jerseys with the black and then the blue helmets or whatever. And I think it might have been Gibbs or whoever had like a long sleeve, like black underneath, and with the football, and then tucked in with the dark jersey, and you just couldn't see. And it's just like, okay, well, the call in the field was first down. And then I don't know, like on one of them, it was like, boom, insta judgment from down from the heavens. Whatever we got from New York or wherever just said not a first down. Then the other one, it was like, after a media break, they take a media break, the TV timeout, like a full 2 minutes, come back, and then they're like, the previous play is now under review. And I told you, if they got right up to the line where Russ snuck the one and just ran the next play, I don't know that replay even intervenes, but it was almost
Probably
like they had time to nitpick it. Similarly, the non-snap judgment, Mike Gesicki catches a ball that very clearly was not a catch that hits the ground. The Bengals come up, rush up, and run that play. I don't know if that's like a coaching awareness thing, if that's just like bad luck that you're in 2 different kind of situations where the Bengals are able to get off a quick snap and then the Steelers aren't. Those kind of things seem, though, to always be on the scales of balance. The Steelers are always losing those kind of battles, I feel like, and they can't challenge it, or they lose like the overturned plays or whatever else. But this offense, they finally score a touchdown. They get Pat Freiermuth involved. And then they go 3 and out after this. The defense forces, 2 punts in the fourth quarter. They got the Bengals locked down to a 5-play possession for 18 yards, a 3-play possession for -4. And then, of course, they got to get the kneel down on the turnover at downs in the end. But the Steelers have 2 opportunities at the end of this game. And you had pretty much said, I think, Mike Tomlin decides to punt. And you're like, well, that's game over. And my cousin's sitting there next to me. Let me tell you, it was a cold game, and people are going to talk about the cold. But it was freaking cold in Cincinnati, too. It was, like, maybe not as cold because it was still daylight out there, but the wind chill and everything, It was a cold game. That was a tough game too, and these teams put up a lot of offense. This was more conducive to, this is a hard rock of a football, but you get a muff punt, or you get a guy that touches the ball. Connor Hayward makes a hell of a play, stays in bounds, recovers it. And this team, they were gifted some good field position throughout the game. They got one at their 45-yard line, 3 plays, 7 yards. They can't get a yard sometimes, and then they're running the ball 12 times. They ran the ball on first down in this game. They had to settle for a field goal, 6 plays, 12 yards. I know there's penalties involved, just self-defeating type stuff, but you also had, everybody's going to remember George Pickens because he had a play that was, deep. He would have been in the red zone, maybe even within the 10, if I recall correctly. I think that might have been third quarter. But I remember Calvin Austin having one off his hands. I remember Van Jefferson having a ball hit him square in the face mask. I remember Pat Freiermuth. The one at the very end was obviously pretty bad too, but he had one just a little earlier in the game, and he was having yet another career game against the Bengals. Probably goes over 100 yards at the very end. If it hits him right off the 88s, there was about 20 seconds left in the game. And you think to yourself, the Steelers probably have enough time. If he doesn't just break free entirely for a touchdown, I don't think he does necessarily,
No.
but they have enough time to come up, clock it, let Boswell kick. Boswell, he ends the season with 41 field goals. He's shy of David Akers' record of 44 in the season. Some folks thought he might have been able to break it, just didn't have the opportunities over the last few games. But he nails a longer kick earlier on the series before it. You thought this was going to be, the game-winning deal. George Pickens, to me, just kind of stopped at the top of his route. I don't know if he realized the ball was coming his way, lost it in lights, whatever be the case, then tried to stretch out, make some matrix half-ass catch that if he wouldn't have held up on running his route, the pause, the hesitation, whatever it was. I know some people said, well, if Russ threw that inside. Well, Russ very clearly was throwing it toward the boundary because there wasn't time left in the game. Why would he throw it necessarily on the inside there either?
Where the ball landed,
yeah,
was toward, it looked like it was the outside, but that can be a combination of George breaking the route off earlier than anticipated. It absolutely did not look like he even thought the ball was going to come his direction, right? It just looked like he was not even thinking he was going to be the target of that play, and yet he was. So, let's just put it this way: it was not 14's best game. And people were complaining about not getting him in early. They did get him in early. They got him a touch almost right away. Went for nothing.
Yeah.
But, and the Bengals are going to do what they could do. They changed their defensive schema up. They tried to do some different things. And it clearly had an impact on what they were doing. But they simply didn't attack the same way they attacked during the first game. They took a lot of checkdowns until they took those checkdowns away. And for whatever reason, they just assumed those checkdowns were going to be there again. And they weren't. They took them away at the end of the last game. They took them away from the get-go in this game, which meant they needed to hit those crossers. They needed to hit those seam routes. They needed to take advantage of the middle of the field, which was going to be a weakness. And they just didn't do it. I questioned the game planning a lot for that game. I questioned the offensive play calls for that game. A lot of it. It just really didn't feel like there was any adjustment. And I read an article in The Athletic, and I can't help but agree with it. The Steelers need to figure out who they are, because who they think they are is not who they are, right?
It's too late for that.
Yeah, I know, but they need to figure it out, because they need to make that adjustment. They think they're a ground and pound team, right? We're gonna run the ball. The problem is you're not good at running the ball. You're not.
No,
you're seventh. You're seventh worst in the league. You're not good at running the ball.
You've got good running backs, but the offensive line and compounded here by broken hand now, left hand for Mason McCormick, who's going to be fitted with a cast in his. That's to be determined, but he's a rookie player. We're talking about rookie Walls. You got him next to Zach Frazier, also rookie. These guys have not had any rest or a break or anything. They're playing now, heading into their 18th game. But he's playing in place of James Daniels. I'm like, I would keep wondering, like, what ifs if James Daniels doesn't get hurt, if Troy Fautanu, the first round pick, doesn't get hurt, if things are any different with the way that they pass or run block. It's hard to say, but you tend to forget this wasn't the way that you originally had it drawn up, where you're like, well, this line completely stinks. And that goes over to, by the way, Pickens plays 56 to 61 snaps. He's on the field damn near the entire game, and Freiermuth is right behind him at 49, outside of offensive linemen and, of course, Russell Wilson. But you've got people blaming Russell Wilson on so much. It's like Freiermuth, he had more than one that was right at him that ends up getting dropped. He did rumble for the touchdown. They started using him on these out routes later in the game that they just kind of started breaking down the Bengals defense. And it looked like that they were going to make this, kind of miracle comeback. There was enough time left on the clock. The defense did their job. But Brian, it's like I see people, yes, play calling. Arthur Smith's playbook, I don't necessarily have as big of a problem with. I mean, it's not like these Matt Canada plays where things aren't getting drawn up. They're not taking shots or anything like that. The bigger problem is, I know we saw 84 on the field, Cordero Patterson, but you saw Jalen Warren limp off after a kick return. Maybe that wasn't visible on TV. I don't know. Saw it from the stands. Najee Harris goes into the tent. These guys slam their head on the cold, hard ground or whatever. Unfortunately, Najee's starting to get moving, and then boom, he's pulled off the field. But I don't want to see a pitch out to Cordero Patterson. It looks like he's running in quicksand. And at this time, there's certain points in this game where you look in the third and fourth quarter, I understand a lot of what you do is determined on trying to fool the defense into whether you're running the football or not. But when you constantly do it on first down, you're not fooling anybody. The whole beauty of being the offense is you know what's coming. The defense doesn't, but it's almost like the defense is like, how many, I wonder how many plays they ran that was on first down. If it's 12 runs on first down, you have to think there's maybe 8 or fewer passes. It's over half. Half the time you could flip the coin and just be like, well, we're just going to be in run defense.
I would be interested, and I'm not going to be, let me put it this way, I'm not interested enough to actually do the work to find out, but I am interested if somebody else would like to do the statistics to find out how many times they've actually thrown on first down over the season, because I bet you it's damn few.
Well, the total amount of first downs the Steelers secured was 16. So you're going to get a few just by virtue of, change of possession and stuff like that too. But when you're talking about 12 out of a range of probably, how many possessions are there in this game for the Steelers? About a dozen or so. So yeah, it's half or more in that category of just running the football, right? So just that 38 minutes to 22 minutes, right on the dot too, no change. 22 minutes.
That tells you a lot.
It tells you way too much. The Steelers 4-12 on third downs. Like I said, it wasn't just Pickens dropping the ball, but yet you've got people after Tom and you got people after Arthur Smith. I mean, it's all fair, but it still felt like the coaching and everything is going to be enough to get the job done. Tomlin put it in a position where the defense, they were getting their job, they were doing the job, they get the ball back to the offense, and the offense just doesn't do anything. But at the same time, it's like Smith they call out Pickens' number and they call on Fryermuth's number there, and these guys don't come down with the football. Van Jefferson on one, like I said, it hits him in the face mask. Calvin Austin, you've seen him make the routine plays routinely, as they like to say. And nobody made any of them routinely, and it just made it harder. So now you've got all the nut jobs on, social media and whatnot. All the Yinzers are out here, pitchforks and torches, saying, put in Justin Fields. There was a Justin Fields freaking chant in the fourth quarter. It's like, what do you think this guy's going to do any differently but take and run the ball when it breaks down out of bounds? Okay, maybe he's it's not like, Russ got sacked. That's going to happen. He's going to hold on to the ball. He's trying to protect the football. They're trying not to turn the ball over, which had been a problem in the previous games. But they take 4 sacks, as many as the Steelers got on Joe Burrow. And you're calling for Justin Fields. And I'm like, Justin Fields is probably not going to make these same reads or passes. That's going to just get dropped. Like Pickens had it right in the breadbasket on the one. Fryermuth right off the numbers. Like I said, Jefferson off the face mask. I don't know that he gives you a better opportunity to win, but yet people are in the press conference earlier asking Mike Tomlin, do you have packages for him? Do you have this or that? What do you think an opposing defense like the Baltimore Ravens thinks when they see Justin Fields in?
They think he's going to run.
Yeah, and when he doesn't, you get the result of the Cleveland Browns game where he throws a ball, you don't get a flag with George Pickens, and it's game over.
Yeah.
You can't win. Hindsight's always 20/20. You got to suck it up and just accept this as the loss. And what your hope is going forward is you saw a defense that maybe woke up. We got some individual names I would like to throw out too as part of this. As we get over to the defensive side of the ball once again, but hopefully they can limit the Baltimore Ravens, who I must remind everybody, the Baltimore Ravens lost to the same teams. Now, I think they did sweep the Bengals this year, though.
They did.
Yeah. The Bengals had been a problem.
By the skin of their teeth.
By the skin of their teeth, exactly. Yeah. Those were close games. So, but during the
once last second and once in overtime, I think.
Yeah, the 3-game and 11-day span. You have the Steelers and Ravens trading, and then you have the Ravens lost to the Chiefs, and they also lost to the Eagles. So they've lost to the same teams, and they also lost to the Cleveland Browns at a point during the season. So, like, everybody just saying this, it's like it's more condensed. But guess what the Ravens got? They got the gift of a bye week before they had to do the 11-day span, and then they got to go play the New York Giants. They go into New York. Yeah, okay, they take care of business, and then they go and they sit players before they play the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so they get some extra rest there in both cases, and they're fresh and ready to go and to host the Steelers at home. And then after that, whatever. So I know that they got their victories and everything, but man, what a gift that they got with all this. And they got the rest guys again against Cleveland. this past week, as they just put up some points early on, because the Browns, what were they going to do with Bailey Zappi? They didn't have anybody on the field. It was almost like they were just ready to tank.
Well, they clearly were not trying to win that game.
Everybody was on injured reserve.
Put Bailey Zappi out there, and you're not trying to win a game. I get you're trying to see what you got, but that you're not going to win. I think here's the thing, and everybody knows it. They know how to play Lamar. If they can be at or close to full strength so that they can actually execute that plan. Unlike the last time where they had injuries and they had people missing, if they can be at full strength or close to it, they can keep it a competitive game and maybe pull out the win. They can win in Baltimore. They've won in Baltimore. Let's not forget that the last time when they did lose, it was the first game in 9 games they'd lost. And I know a lot of the games in Baltimore were meaningless and they were all backups. They still know how to beat Baltimore. They know how to play against them. And the best thing you can say about this Bengals game is that they still had a chance to win, even though the offense, by all rights, had no reason to have a chance to win.
No, you're absolutely right there. The offense just, it was bad. And you were like, are they ever going to get this together? And all of a sudden they zoomed down the field and made it look easy. And it's not like the Bengals just let up or anything either.
Let's step back a second. They got 2 PIs to help them make it look easy.
On the very first drive. But man, some of those, Cam Taylor-Britt, just like, come on, dude. Like, he just handfuls of jerseys and arms and everything else. By the way, you are correct. The overtime game was 41-38 where they beat the Bengals, and then the other one was 35-34.
Skin of their teeth.
Yeah, where they won at home. So I know a lot's been said about, we're going to say more about the Ravens and everything like that, but versus playing the Texans, that could have been favorable for either team. They're like, hey, the other team sucks and we could beat them. Texans got a little bit of get right with the Titans. I mean, that wasn't very hard to do, but they had to go play on the road. But you play a familiar opponent for a third time. It's going to be tough for either one of these teams. I could envision just in the Ravens maybe without Zay Flowers too, which is a huge component to what they do.
Really? So, didn't know that.
Oh yeah, Zay Flowers knee injury, not looking good for Saturday. Perhaps beyond that, but for Saturday. So keep your eyes on that. And you never want to see like hey, I'm not like cheering, hey, players injured, this and that, but when you're down a guy, like last year, I was looking at this from the same viewpoint of last year. Okay, the Steelers had a 3-game win streak. They needed to win all 3 games and get some help with Mason Rudolph as the quarterback to get to Buffalo, where you have a game moved in a snowstorm and you're without TJ Watt and you're playing Michael Walker, you're playing Eric Rowe, you're playing Miles Jack. Marcus Golden is in place of TJ Watt. And what chance did you have against that? So everybody talking about the one and done, I feel a lot better knowing that some of the players, even if they weren't a full 100% fully charged battery for this game against the Bengals, you had a lot of these guys on the field. There's a lot of, let me give a quick shout out to special teams real quick too, because special teams, when you're playing against like John Harbaugh, you know he's a special teams guy, you know he's attention to detail with all of that. Danny Smith, the ability of these guys to generate turnovers, to be aware, every one of these players to stay in bounds. Mark Robinson running with a full head of steam, waiting to just nail someone and knock the ball out of their hands. The only problem was Calvin Austin nearly sunk it. Losing that ball.
Let's just make sure, give them, because they played great on special teams all season.
Yes.
But let's be fair. Yeah, Calvin Austin, he kind of screwed up. But yeah. it is, you understand that. As I said, it feels weird because as trending up as they were earlier, they are playing not their best football right now. So the question is, can you break that spell and start to once again go back and trend towards playing your best football? It's all about timing, right? And everybody says the same thing. You want to enter this tournament playing your best ball. They're not, but they do have an opportunity to try and right that. And maybe they can start to play their best ball again. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, and I liked some of the things I saw defensively. You mentioned Keanu Benton earlier, along with, I don't know if you noticed, but Preston Smith was playing some.
He had a nice game.
Playing some defensive line. He's playing with his hand in the dirt along with Benton. Yep. And he got in there for the 1 sack. Cam Hayward was out of his mind. I liked that. And then he also played on the outside too, standing up. He got some time there too, but that's what you got Nick Herbig for. I think Herbig actually drew one of the false starts. My goodness, 75 is that Orlando Brown?
Yeah.
Left tackle, yeah. Or jumping they got him once or twice for it, but man, he was constant. And like we've been saying this for the last couple of seasons now, it doesn't appear that they're ever going to call it. Let's call out Beanie Bishop, who just happens to have a knack of finding the football, man. Just some kind of awareness, whatever Beanie magic is there. He comes up with the ball yet again off a tip pass. Patrick Queen almost came down with one. But you had some things that they were trying to do a little bit differently, even if they were just rushing 4. You still had Beanie got out there some. Excuse me. They're changing up with Cam Sutton. Yeah, Corey Trice in there the whole time for Dante Jackson. Yeah, he did get a little burned earlier, but they put him. Maybe because Joey wasn't 100%, but they did this in the last game where Joey was covering T. Higgins before. For whatever reason, They felt like we're not going to let T. Higgins beat us and see what we could do with Chase.
They tried to play scheme.
Yeah,
that's what we're gonna put Joey on T, and we're gonna try and scheme Chase and see if we can win. Notice that when T went out, Joey went to Chase, and that's the way that they went with that. But the defense had their moments. They're the only reason that they were in the game. Right. If the defense has a game like they did in Cincinnati, this was a huge blowout.
Oh, yeah.
And awful. The fact that they were able to come up with ways, and they, as you said, they did different things. They sent pressure way more than they have all year against Joe Burrow. They were sending multiple guys at multiple times, and some doing a little Dick LeBeau, like, where's it coming from? Right. And sending pressure and pulling other guys back. So you still only maybe had 4 guys, but they weren't the 4 guys you thought you were going to get.
And you had Elliott playing quite a bit, mostly man coverage over Gesicki at times, over maybe Yosavash. He was on wide receivers. He was on Jamar Chase sometimes when they threw it in the slot and just had Minka kind of freelancing at the top. They brought KZ in. KZ, I think, had some decent snap counts in this game too. Let me see where he was. I'm kind of interested, actually. Okay, so 9 out of the 74 defensive plays, 12%. That's probably a small uptick from him. Preston Smith at 26. So you had contributions coming from all over, and they're gonna do this a little bit differently, of course, against the Ravens, because you got to stop Derrick Henry. You've got a slew of inside linebackers that can help do that. I mean, Roberts he played about 38% of the game. Queen doesn't ever come off the field. He played the full time. Elliott did just a little bit. He came out for about 5 plays. Corey Trice did too. Cam Sutton. TJ Watt, 80% of the game. I know they were trying to preserve him a little bit as they could. Oh, the one false start was Jeremiah Moon. And I believe it was the right tackle on that one. I was like, you're scared of 49? Like, you just saw the 9 on his jersey and immediately jumped.
9.
Yeah, no, wrong guy. Like, I was cracking up about that one. But I know Beanie didn't play a whole lot, but I think these are some of the things. We saw some of the corners and safeties making some plays against the run. You're not going to have to, you got to stop Derrick Henry. We know that they're capable of doing this. We've seen the Steelers do it in the past. We saw them do it this year against the Ravens. Now it's time. They're going to have a healthy team. They're going to have all of the guys that they didn't have when they played in Baltimore. And you just got to wonder what that mentality is going to be like, because in the Steelers locker room, they're pissed off. They've lost 4 straight games. This is not who we are. We need to correct this. What did we do and what did we do well? Well, they don't have to sit in all of these long studies, film sessions and be like, what do the Ravens do and everything? What they just need to do is to tweak. I think, for just paraphrasing what Tomlin said, the familiarity is now more about strategy. Because if you go do the same things, there's a familiarity where the other team's like, I've seen this before. And for guys that have been there for multiple years in this rivalry, TJ Watt and Cam Hayward and Minka, they're going to see that on the Ravens side and say, oh, well, I've seen something like this before. On the flip side, you've got like the Marlon Humphreys and, Roquan's been there for a couple years now. And they're going to say, hey, I've seen this look before. How do you disguise that? How do you change it up? How do you make this different? If what happens if you do get into a shootout with this team? I think it really does lean defensively. It could lean towards the 2 kickers. Even with Tucker being down and out, he's rebounded a little bit even since that game, but he missed 2 against the Steelers. So at home, and having a healthy Joey Porter, having Jackson back, hopefully, but even Trace, that gives you some optimism, especially against the receivers that they have. They just have to be able to, I don't want to get too much into the pregame, but we know what needs to be done. And it just seems like if they were able to do this defensively against the Bengals, if they could clean up just a little bit of this offensively, you go back to the game that they had in Baltimore, you had a pick 6. That was unfortunate after you just got that 1 turnover, but you had Russ not slide, take a nasty hit, fumble. They were in that game. And I think those things just kind of sit there a little differently than if you had to play the Houston Texans, go to Houston, for example. You're going into a hostile environment. But I think that familiarity and even if it's coulda, woulda, shoulda, you're like, well, you know what? I think we did. We had a chance to sweep this team. I think so. You kind of throw the rest of it out the window and you're thinking to yourself, okay, how do we advance to the next round? You do it over a divisional opponent. You do it against a team that you feel that you could beat. And I think that they have that in the locker room. It's not like they're going to Buffalo, missing a bunch of players and just like, well, yeah, you go down immediately in that game and, then it's all out the window.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, if they could put, I'm just going to speculate. I'm going to put my Karnak the Magnificent hat on for a second, and say, if Denver has to go to Houston now because Denver's the bottom seed. So there's a perfectly legitimate thought that Denver goes to Buffalo.
Denver goes to Buffalo. Yeah.
Chargers go to Houston then.
Correct.
Right. Chargers go to Houston. Chargers probably can beat Houston. Denver could surprise Buffalo, right? I mean, they have a solid defense, and you never know. So let's say all those things come into fruition. Then we have to play the Chargers in San Diego, I guess. Then, but
nobody's going to play anybody in San Diego, but
or wherever, Los Angeles.
0-for-2 on the Chargers so far.
Big giant thingy-majig. Yeah, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, my point is, all the road teams could win. There's legitimate threats that all the road teams could win this upcoming weekend. In the AFC.
All the way across the board, you got the Packers at the Eagles. You've got that's the least likely.
I don't think that one happens.
The Commanders at the Buccaneers.
That's very possible.
And the Vikings at the Rams.
Oh, that almost could be a definite.
Yeah, I mean it is. I'd probably on the AFC side. The least likely, I think, to flip the switch here would be the Broncos against the Bills, but
it is.
Hey, you never know.
The Bills.
Yeah,
and they're a very, very, very good team. But I mean, they've looked pedestrian at times during the season too.
That's a good point too, because the Justin Fields folks. I look at the games like the Colts game. I look at the Cowboys game, the ones you wish you could have back that you could take back. And what if Russell Wilson played in that game?
Oh man.
And I understand. I mean, I know Russ isn't like the Russ of 10 years ago, and he's got some mobility, but he doesn't have all the mobility in the world. He's a smaller guy than Roethlisberger. You got to remember that. He's got to look over these hulking offensive and defensive linemen in his face to be able to deliver this ball at times, and he still does. But his decisions on what he does post snap, in many cases, I'm going to take over just the Fields' decisions. Fields just... We saw like all the upticks in offense that just it couldn't get it done.
Yeah.
Even against teams like the Colts, the Cowboys, or the Raiders. The losses on the schedule, they lost 4 games, of course, one to the Ravens, 35-10 shellacking, 23-20, all on the road, by the way. The Buffalo Bills. So they lost to the Texans, they lost to the Rams on the road in that shootout, and then they just lost to the Patriots. Anyways, before I forget, I was talking special teams. What about Corliss Waitman and the ball that hits the dirt, and he somehow left-footed, got off like the punt of the century, like this pitch punt.
I mean, you lose this guy that you go out and pay for, who had done a great job, and Waitman comes in and does a great job. I mean, he will be employed next year somewhere. It may or may not be here because we still have this free agent that we paid who had been doing great, but he's earned himself a job somewhere.
Yeah, Cameron Johnston, and you go yet another guy that you lost and coulda, woulda, shoulda. You still didn't know. I know somebody made a very valid point about the Steelers and their offense. It was a caller, and I agreed with them on this one. And it was just, they don't have the personnel. They don't have the talent. Why do you think they kept looking for another wide receiver? They just don't have the guys in some
Yeah.
cases. That's the truth on the offensive line. It's the truth with the receiving options. You got to go with who you go with. And when you go to your playmakers like George Pickens and when Pat Freiermuth, you went to the guys that should be your stars. And those stars don't make the big plays. And that's how you end up, narrowly losing a game like that. We're going to talk a little bit more. We're going to preview the Ravens later this week, so check back with us, folks. But I think that closes a lot of what I wanted to get off my chest. It's that time of the year now where half of the league, they'd probably be envious to be where you're at in the playoffs. We would like to see Mike Tomlin, get this chip off his shoulder, the Steelers get it off their shoulder and get their first playoff victory since 2016. We were hoping for a home playoff game. Didn't happen. In so many other years, you've just seen, the 2020 implosion where you lose Devin Bush, and you lose Bud Dupree. You lose TJ Watt before the Bills playoff game last year. You could go back to 2017. Since that last time they won, and they go back out there 13-3 without Ryan Shazier and host the Jaguars in a shootout. You're just tired of missing key components to this team. And it seems like they have the key components to make a run. Just don't get caught up in all the, Doug Peterson gets fired and this guy gets fired, and they're dragging every name out from underneath the rock. Rex Ryan all of a sudden is going to interview for a Jets job. And
I saw the blurb that teams will be contacting the Steelers to trade for Mike Tomlin. Already being pulled out.
Yeah, that's already there. And it's like, come on, man. Nobody's trading for Mike Tomlin. There's parts of me that want some fresh ideas. I think, if you had to ask me honestly, I don't have a problem with Mike Tomlin being around, extending him, everything else. I think he gets it. I think people say, well, certain things are antiquated. And it's like, no, I believe that you get, without Mike Tomlin, you end up being the Tennessee Titans because Mike Vrabel held a lot of that together. And these are the guys that get more out of less. Yeah. One of the callers had said he gets less out of less too, or less out of the more. And that's what they were talking about, was like, you're relying on like Calvin Austin and then doesn't end up maybe turning out. In some games, yes. In some games, no. So that's also true. But I think it's unfair to lay this at his feet when he doesn't have the full complement of guys. You go back to 2016 and it's still been the same knock. They end up in the AFC title game because they finally have Le'Veon Bell. They didn't have Bell through the playoffs the whole time. You go all the way back to the Ravens in 2014 for that one home game. It's time for a little bit of payback from the Steelers. There's nobody left, I think, sans Cam Hayward and Mike Tomlin from that. Maybe like Danny Smith and maybe another assistant or something, but pretty much a fresh slate. But Tom will bring up the history lessons. He knows this is like a heated rivalry, and this will be the first one of these playoff games now that's actually in Baltimore, and they get Lamar in Baltimore. But imagine the feather in your cap when you have the guy for the first time anyone's done this in the NFL that's thrown for over 40 touchdown passes and fewer than 5 interceptions on the season. Yeah, he's doing a heck of a job there. That offense has been, just humming as of late. But this is Steelers defense. You throw this all out the window. It's playoff football. It's going to be the rivalry. It's going to be both of these teams just fighting and duking it out in the trenches, just hoping, that the Steelers could get the better end of that. Try to give some people some more optimism when we come back around to this later in the week. Brian, thanks for joining me once again, my friend.
Happy to be here. I wish it was a nicer reason.
Yeah, and you think about it, though, if the Steelers did win this game, Freiermuth, let's say he catches the ball, or Pickens, and they run up and they clock it, and Oswell hits like a 50, let's just say it's a 50-yarder. I'm just throwing numbers out the window here. And he nails it, and you're like, are you feeling that great about the win, too? You're kind of in the same area that you're in. At least it's a W.
Yeah, do you remember there was a game last year that after the game, we won the game and we both were like, I'm not even happy we won this game. There's not I can't come away from this win feeling good about this win. I don't know how we won. We didn't deserve to win. Yeah, look, the way they played, the win simply takes the point where you get to Monday and Tuesday and you're like, well, we won. Now, without it, you're just like, yeah, we stunk.
Yeah, you've had a few of those. I'd say a few of those last season, maybe, because I'm trying to think which one of those. I
don't remember because I've blanked them all out of my head.
For some reason, I'm thinking it was like Cincinnati, or it was before that. They went on the skid where Kenny Pickett got hurt, And then Mitch Trubisky came in, stunk it up, and he got to play like yesterday too. And you're just like, oh, just there's some interesting. It's kind of funny to see some of the guys that got thrown around because you had Levis and Rudolph rotating in a game yesterday. You had Mitch Trubisky playing in a game yesterday because Allen got his start and then immediately jogged to the sideline so he could keep his streak intact. You had Joshua Dobbs playing for the 49ers. It was just everything was all over the place. It was kind of comical in some ways just to kind of see the players that are still kind of floating out there, still playing. At least it's not like you still aren't seeing like Brian Hoyer get out there. But yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo with the Rams, for example, and
that was weird.
It was, and it was a 10-win team with the Seahawks, but by virtue of 2 14-win teams in the NFC, they were already forced out of the playoff window. So imagine that if the Steelers went 10-7 and didn't make it. The Bengals, this is why some of these games earlier really count, 9-8. And it's like, hey, they started winning some games. They went on like a 4 or 5 game win streak, but yeah, should have maybe won some of the games earlier in the season. It was good that they got their stuff together, but it's too little too late. And I was just looking for like some Trubisky stats. Oh, he's 15-21 for 101 yards. And a touchdown. 101 yards.
I don't need to wallow in his misery.
Yeah. And then Pickett didn't even end up playing. They played Tanner McKee over with the Eagles, who with their backups still beat the Giants 20-13. So there's plenty of bad situations around the National Football League that I would rather not be in. I mean, you close the book. This is where I'm going to end this show at. You close the book on this season. If you get a playoff win here, at least the one win, I think you're feeling pretty good overall. And I think if you could beat the Ravens, then you're thinking you could beat anybody. And that's just the little momentum starter that you need. You had the Steelers do this before as like a 6th seed. You saw the New York Giants do it before with, just the talented teams, the talented team that they had, Michael Strahan. It's tough for me to say Eli Manning talented, but he's got rings, right? And they're able to do what they did. So, but you look at some of the situations around the league, like the New York Jets, the New England Patriots, even the Browns for that matter. You look at Jacksonville, you look at Tennessee, Indianapolis at 8-9. And you really don't know if you've even got, you talked about quarterback too. I'm good with riding with Russ. It would have been interesting to see Russ for a full year, or Russ with
depends on the dollars.
Better, yeah, that's good. There's going to be some money things too. I think everybody just assumes the Steelers will go out and sign a wide receiver too, or whatever. I think they're going to have to lean on the draft to fill some spots.
So do I.
Particularly depending on what happens in the backfield with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. I mean, Najee's been nothing but dependable, and people say, well, he plods around. Well, he's gotten 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. He's the first guy to do that since Chris Johnson.
Troy Aikman made a good point about that. Yeah. With 18 games or 17 games now, we have to rethink what 1,000-yard season means.
Yeah,
it's not the same as it once was.
Should it be 1,200? And, if Saquon ended up going after Dickerson's record, I get all that.
He still did it.
He still did it.
And I don't want Najee gone. I like Najee, right? But, he's not going to get premium dollar here. And nor do I think he necessarily deserves premium dollar. Is he a top 10 back in the league? I don't know. He's not top 5. So I don't,
no,
he's not going to get that kind of cash. Maybe he gets overpaid in free agency because everybody gets overpaid in free agency. So it's not going to surprise me if they dip at running back in the draft. I agree with you. I think they have to dip at wide receiver in the draft. And then it's going to really be, what's Russ going to play for? If it's $40 million a year, I'm not sure I'm paying it.
You might get somewhere in there. I already talked about the shenanigans with the Watson contract that the Browns are trying to do, but let's see. Najee unrestricted schedule be not unrestricted free agent. A little soon to talk about this, but him and Warren being the restricted free agent. But with both of those guys in the backfield, Najee still gets it done. He gets it done in Matt Canada offenses with some weak offensive lines. Still breaks a lot of tackles. Still puts dudes on their ass. And I'll take that over like. I like what the Steelers have here. If you remember at the beginning, no matter how this ends up finishing after Saturday, there wasn't anybody that had this team even making the playoffs, let alone winning 10 games. Everybody looked at us cross-eyed like we were freaking crazy biased hosts. And we're sitting here telling you once again, it's possible that they could beat the Ravens. They're on a bad streak here. But all it takes is, Ravens played pretty, for the most part, mistake-free football. And they go to start making some mistakes. They end up down 2 scores at home to the Steelers, like let's say a 10-point game. I'm sure they think they could come back with that offense, but there's going to be some doubt that's going to sit in their mind. There's going to be, this is not the team I think that they wanted to face. We'll talk more about that as we continue forward. So hopefully we'll read your comments, folks. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, leave a rating or review wherever you might be watching or listening from. And until next time, we'll be previewing the Baltimore Ravens later this week. If you happen to be anywhere where the snowpocalypse is going on right now, please be safe out there. My name's Joe Kuzma. My buddy over here, one Mr. Brian E. Roach, as we always close out the show. We encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.